Hello and welcome to Honest Faith Conversations. As always, I am your co-host, Miguel Covarrubias.
And I am Kathy Covarrubias. And today, let's talk about Mr. Robot Season 2.
Well, again, spoiler alert, if you have not yet seen Season 2, this is the most recent season. Season 3 begins here in October, as well as Walking Dead begins here in October.
Yes.
So,
as well as Stranger Things.
Yes, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about here coming up. But in the meantime, at the end, we'll bring it up again. But we've got a blank space right there when we come back from Vegas, which will be we have open. We're going to let it sit there for a week. If you guys have anything to give us, any suggestions to give us for that episode, it may actually be on the Netflix series, on a new television series. I can't remember what it's called, but it's about serial killers and about trying to think like serial killers for the FBI.
Oh, Mindful something or something mind or...
Yeah.
That one. We're so bad.
Anyway, let us move on to our summary and review. Well, summary, really quick for you, is that this is kind of the aftermath of Season 1. He's kind of taking a more...
Step back,
I would say, but it's also more of the Matrix kind of mixed with other... I would say there are pieces of Requiem for a Dream throughout the season, which is another one of those movies that you really only want to watch once because it's a very heavy movie. But there's a lot of just kind of the aftermath of things, and I think that's kind of what and gaining control. The entire theme was about control. Control of self and control in deals and all this stuff like that. And so that's kind of my summary.
All right. Mine, of course, we're focused on Elliot. We also have, throughout the season, we see more of Angela, whereas before she was more of a side character. Now she's more trying to, like, do her own thing, like trying to bring the power down herself. But then it doesn't go as planned, but we'll talk about that later. And we find out that, there's just some plot twists that we didn't kind of see coming. And I would have to say that the series did a pretty good job, because usually I can pick out the plot twists. I'm like, I bet this is just a dream, or I bet that he's the killer. And this one kind of was more of like, oh, like, okay, I guess it wasn't like a surprising twist. It was more like, oh, I get it.
It's
kind
a
of
twist.
A reveal. Yeah. And your review.
I really liked Season 2. I liked Season 1 a little bit better, but I think that this avoided the horribleness that is most TV series sophomore slumps. Mm-hmm. That usually the first season is incredible, and then you have a second season that doesn't quite live up to the hype. Which, I think it did in some ways. In other ways, I think it didn't. I think it did kind of really just step above and beyond of where I think most second seasons of most TV shows go, where you're still kind of in that, I have no idea where they're going to go with this kind of sense at the very beginning, and then it really gets a little slow of a start, and then builds, and it gets this... really kind of that cliffhanger at the end there where you're like, I have no idea where they're going to go with the third season.
Yeah, but it's more of a, I don't know what's coming, not a, like, I don't know what they're going to do with it. You know what I mean? It's not like...
What's a both?
Yeah. I liked the first season better than the second season. However, I feel like the first season was more like surface level themes, like very, like... sophomoric ideas, whereas the second season it was a little bit more complex, a little bit more adult in its themes, and I think that may be why people didn't necessarily like it and thought it was slow.
I don't think so. I think it's more that it didn't launch the story, the narrative didn't launch as quick as it needed to.
Well, I think so.
It's not. It's not because the themes were more adult. I think it's because the narrative didn't launch quickly enough in that. And this is really what I wanted to talk about with this, is that it really was more of the aftermath of season one. It's really kind of seeing what happened from the hack of the century, or, well, computers haven't been around that long, but the hack to end all hacks to kind of freeze the banks and to create an even playing field for everyone else, which, as we saw, it didn't really help. It made an impact in negative ways. That it really pushed things to be worse rather than better. And I think this really is a show of how a lot of our good intentions, unless we kind of weigh everything, and I mean everything, absolutely everything, and it's impossible to do so, that oftentimes it'll result in ruin. It'll result in something that you didn't intend to begin with.
Well, because we can't see the
things are supposed to go in modern society now, yet when it gets down to it, some of those big ideas, yeah, they look great on paper, but they'll never really work in real life because humans are involved. Is that we are all flawed. We are all just, liable to be corrupted. We're all able to be controlled in some ways.
In some ways, like, we're not as predictable as people think that we are.
And I think it really showed that some of these good intentions can open the door for evil. Like, for instance, with Evil Corp. We're going to just go with Evil Corp. Yeah. With Evil Corp, with them basically trying to control the cryptocurrency, then is use eCoin instead. Is that, oh yeah, you can get your $50 US currency allotment, or you can get your money back in eCoin, which would be, worth more. And then, in a sense, they control the economy. They control the market. They control everything, as it were.
And that's why when you see that scene when he's talking to the government official's like, you're crazy. Like, what? Like, why are you coming up with this? Like, this is ridiculous.
Well, yeah, and this is like what we talked about in last week's episode with the big business kind of controlling everything then. They would be able to set themselves apart from all their competitors, is that you would have no other choice but to use Evil Corp. And it really puts more money in the pockets of Evil Corp, of the CEO, which you see that his whole thing about control and power is that he asks himself, was he the most powerful man in that room thing, which, I don't know, that just made him like so much darker and dehumanized him so much more for me, and made him a character that I'm like, oh, he's
very dickish.
Yeah. And I don't know what Angela was doing with there was that one episode where she thought she was going on a date with him, but it ended up being with these other guys too. And yeah,
well, that was definitely a power move.
Yeah,
like, he set it up. We'll talk about that in a moment.
But it really, with all of the good intentions, it really opens the door for evil, and especially to take control of the situation. And we have so many good intentions with wanting to do some of these things. It opens the door for people to take those good intentions and to misuse them and to shape them in their own way. And I've seen this so often in the church, where people do this, where they take good intention of their congregation, where the congregation gives money and says, use it as you will, and the church will end up using it to, like, throw a shindig that doesn't really help anybody, but it's just pat themselves on the back and say, oh, look, we got some more money from this person. Or that it's these good intentions that people twist to really make it under their control. And I have instance after instance of this happening, and I really don't want to go in too much into it, because I feel like it's more of a thing that we should talk about, where do we go from here, kind of thing. But it's in society, and it's very much prevalent in everything that we do. Is you have those people, and I don't know if you've ever met somebody like that, but somebody who loves power and control that much that they will take control of any situation that they're in. That they will make sure that they are more powerful than the other person. And this, you saw this in Elliot too, with him struggling with himself, with Mr. Robot, with trying to figure out, which one should be in control and how to take control of his life and the things that he was doing to be in control when it, in a sense, was really just keeping
Mr. Robot at bay and
Yeah.
under a leash. Ultimately, Elliot was putting himself under a leash as well.
Yeah, in a leash, yeah. And I think it really puts everything into this kind of spiral. What I like to call the death spiral is that you end up doing like just one small thing to make sure that you're in control or you're in power. And then that leads to another thing, and it leads to another thing, and it ends up, spiraling out of control. Where, you saw this with Elliot with how eventually he needed Mr. Robot to really kind of get him back to a place where he was not just completely useless. And, Mr. Robot took a little bit more, and it showed by the end that Mr. Robot kind of was in control the entire time. But, that Elliot was keeping him at bay in a sense, but also that he needed to find a different way to be at peace with each other, with himself, as it were. And, we saw this with the Evil Corp, with especially with the going to the government official, is taking it to the next step further, is that, okay, look, your banks don't have any records. You can't really say, who owes you money or whatever, but let's do this e-coin thing so that we can regain control of the market, regain control of the banks. And, that was kind of saying this is a little thing to take back control, and it ended up, it would be a much bigger thing than just a little thing. You also see this with White Rose, who in this series you get to know a little bit more about the White Rose this season, that she is also the leader of the cyber intelligence division of the Chinese government.
Yeah, which I'm just like, that does not really surprise me at all. Because if you want a leader of a cyber gang, I mean, who better to lead a cyber gang than the person who's in charge of keeping the cyber gangs under control?
Yeah, exactly. And it really is just kind of this death spiral of lies that ends up getting out of control. And, it's the lies that we tell ourselves. It's the lies that we end up believing. It's the lies that we, end up telling other people just so that we can begin to control them. And I really think that this series, or this season, sorry, I keep switching back to the British nomenclature for television, which would be series. This would be the second series of Mr. Robot, but it would be season 2 here in America. So, that it really shows that these spirals kind of end up going out of control and really taking control of people, and that they end up becoming bigger than you are. Yeah.
Yep. And ultimately, it's really hard to control that kind of stuff. Like I said, as much as we like to think that we can predict human behavior, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to where we can,
Yeah.
But there's always going to be that variable that it's going to mess you up, and your plans are just going to be thrown out the window. And ultimately, I think Elliot has realized that even after the hack and after freeing everybody of debt, people's lives are still shitty. Like, people are still losing their jobs. Their businesses are falling under. Like, this is not what he planned. Like, he was hoping that everybody was going to have a clean slate. Everybody was going to be able to start over. It was going to be a little bit more merrier. But now he's realized that it's not as happy as he thought it was going to be. And I think that's kind of why that he has built up this delusion around him, like throughout the season. As you guys know, if you watched it, if you haven't watched it, I don't know why you've listened this far into the podcast. But anyway, but you know that we think that he's back at home, and it makes it seem like he is with his mom. who was very controlling, and we knew that she was very controlling because of what we knew about her from season 1. But it turns out he was not at his mom's house. He was actually in jail. But then it kind of made sense because I can't remember his name, but his friend that he hangs out with and has breakfast all the time, and like we didn't know him before, and it makes him seem like they're like good buddies. So that's
exactly,
so we should have been tipped off at that point in time. But I think he developed this delusion. Well, he says it's for us. He says it's for the people who are watching his life, and as he speaks to us in that narrative. But I'm pretty sure he did it to protect himself.
Well, it was kind of a both and, I think, is that it's really a lie that he told himself. That he's doing this for this other friend that he keeps talking to.
Yeah.
And which is the audience, which is their way of breaking the fourth wall. And I think it's a brilliant device, by the way, but it's a lie to himself to protect himself. Is that prison isn't as bad if you tell yourself that you're at home and that you're really doing this for your own good.
Yep, and prison system in America is not. It's well. I mean, you guys know, like, I don't have to tell you how bad it is. Like, go out there and find out yourself. Like, the prison system in America is awful. It is meant to essentially keep people in prison. And most of the prisons in America are for profit, which is also a bad thing because they want to keep people in there so they can make more money.
Yeah, the recidivism rate is ridiculous. And it's also, we are the leading country in the entire world. This is pretty much the only thing that we're still good at as Americans, is that we're number one in how many people we have incarcerated.
Woo.
Yeah, it's not something we should be proud of, I don't think. But...
No, especially since we're supposed to be the land of the free.
The land of the free. Yeah, we have the most people in prison per capita in the entire world.
Yeah, and the problem is that we, I don't know about you, but as a kid, I mean, this is coming from, a white girl, but I always assumed that, you go to prison and you come back out and you're supposed to be ready to join society again. But that doesn't happen. I mean, there are some prisons out there that are starting to realize that they need to work on that and like build more programs. But obviously, the prison that Elliot is in is not one of those.
Well, I think it's one of those things where we don't have enough rites of passage in our society. We don't have enough ways to say, okay, you're done with that phase of your life. Now you're starting a new phase of your life. Let's both mourn the loss of that phase of your life and also celebrate your new path in life. Especially for people like soldiers who are coming home from war, criminals who are getting out of prison, ex-convicts, that these are rites of passage that they need to go through. It's a matter of closure, I think. It's putting that into a box. Is to say, okay, that happened.
Yep.
That was in your past. Don't let it happen again. We need you now more as a member of the society rather than a soldier or an ex-con or whatever it may be. That you've already done that. Okay, it's done. Let's move on.
Well, and part of the problem is it's so hard to get a job once people find out that you've been to prison.
Oh, I know.
And a good job.
Which
going back to prison.
Recidivism rates. Yeah.
But anyway, so obviously, like I said, the prison that Elliot is at is not one of those ones that are like trying to do better by their inmates. I mean, there's obvious crime within the prison. Heck, the warden, I think he was the warden.
Yes, the warden.
He was the head of like a serious like backdoor, like dark internet Craigslist type thing that he pretty much coerced Elliot into helping him with.
Yeah.
And I feel like that because of the delusion that Elliot put himself in, he was not able to really see what was going on.
Well, and I think that's really when he started to wake up.
Uh-huh.
Is when he started to wake up to what was going on around him, why he was thrown. I'm guessing that was in the hole where he was thrown.
Yeah.
Yeah, why all of these things kind of happened was that he looked, and the warden told him not to look. But this was also a wake-up call for the warden, too, because the warden knew that something bad was happening. He just didn't want to acknowledge it because, he wanted to live in his own delusion.
Yep.
That was his way of keeping control.
If I don't look, it's not there.
Exactly.
Yep, just like the monster in the basement.
Yes.
I hope there's not a monster in the basement.
We don't have a monster in the basement.
Okay. But I think that's kind of what I do too. I mean, everybody has coping mechanisms for different things. Like me, just like on the surface level, I cope with essentially like a crap world by just assuming that everybody has good intentions to begin with. Like every interaction that I have with somebody, I go into believing this person is a good person. Until, of course, they prove me otherwise. And in that case, I can change my mind. But I always go into, like, assuming the best of people, which I know a lot of people are going to think that I'm crazy for doing that.
Well, it's not a matter of being naive, but it's about wanting to assume the best in somebody else. And I think that we so oftentimes will let one interaction shade that view of somebody that we can't give the grace and mercy that we're expected to give to people as Christians, as religious people. Is that we end up, having one instance that, it's one and done in a sense. And I think that that's not what's supposed to happen, especially with, like, for instance, people thinking that this is going to be controversial, warning, with the NFL taking a knee protest, that it is not about protesting a flag. It's not about protesting an anthem. It's about protesting the racial injustices and the mistreatment by police officers.
Yes.
And that's all it's protesting. It is not being done to disrespect a flag. It's not being done to disrespect veterans. And for some reason, this is what it has turned into. And for some reason, it's spiraled out of control.
Because people are they're putting their own delusions into the situation. They don't want to acknowledge the fact that, like, the racial divide is still prevalent. It's still a major issue. They don't want to acknowledge it. They don't want to acknowledge that they have to do work. They don't want to acknowledge that they are in the wrong. And so instead, they spin it to make it the other person being in the wrong and the other person being disrespectful, when they need to look into themselves and figure out, hey, why am I upset that they're protesting? What is the real reason why?
Yeah.
It's not because of a piece of cloth.
Yep.
It's because I myself may have some racial biases that I need to work on. Mm-hmm. End of soapbox. But anyway, and going back to the series too with Angela, she also has her own delusions too. I mean, she goes in, she's essentially convinced to work for Evil Corp. Like, oh, go in and fix the problem from within. And I feel like that's what happens a lot of times, especially in politics. People will go in with good intentions, like, hey, I'm going to fix the system. I'm going to be the person that speaks out. I'm going to be the person that corrects this stuff. And it doesn't end up that way. I mean, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't. As much as we wish that one person would be able to fix everybody's problems, it can't be that way. We need to have people behind you. I mean, great leaders can't be leaders unless they have people behind them.
Exactly. And I think that the death spiral was pretty evident for her, too.
Yeah.
That she ended up, off with the good intentions and wanting to do, take them down. But she ended up wanting more and more power to be able to do that from within. And she kept telling herself these little lies that, oh, no, this will be okay because I'm going to be able to get this and then I'll be able to do that. And she ended up believing the lies herself and becoming this just another tool for Evil Corp.
Yeah, and I don't think that she's now under the delusion, I think, that she has to be like near, like almost at the top in order to make change. But you don't have to. There's so many like mid-level management or even like, people at the bottom who've spoken up before and said, hey, this isn't right. We need to fix it. Sometimes they have to tell people from outside of the company, unfortunately, in order to get stuff fixed. But the way that she's going about it, she is ultimately losing sight of her goal, I think. I think now she's more focused on gaining more power instead of being focused on, like, I need to fix the corruption within Evil Corp. And
then you have this weird kind of last couple of scenes for her where she's taken by the Dark Army and subjected to this weird psychological test of, it's the key in the room. And have you cried during sex? Which, these
coming
weird
from
questions.
A little girl was very, very disturbing. And I was like, whoa, Nelly. Let's just back up here.
And I think that's part of it. I think that's an agent of control for the White Rose is that really when you do this, it freaks somebody out. Like if you were to put me into a room and had a little girl asking me these really weird psychological test questions on an old Commodore 64.
As a fish dies in the background.
Yes, as water slowly drains from the fish tank. Yeah, I'm going to be freaked out, and I'm going to be liable to be doing what you asked me to do just to get out of that room. So, it's another weird way that the White Rose is trying to regain some control of the situation, and with Mr. Robot being in control of Phase 2 of, I'm guessing that's the blowing up all the paper records thing. So. Which I didn't realize that building actually existed in New York, I think it is, where Tom Hanks took a picture of it and tweeted about it and said, what do they do in that building? That big building with no windows? That was in Mr. Robot at the end?
Yes. No, but I'm like, are you just assuming that that's what that building really is, or...
No, that's what they said. That was where they're taking all the paper records and they were going to blow it up.
In the show?
Yes.
Okay.
In the show.
In the show.
Outside the show, I didn't know that building actually existed until Tom Hanks actually took a picture of it and said, what did they do in that building? This is the most evil building I've ever seen.
Oh, gotcha. Okay,
Yes.
I see what you're saying. I was like, I thought you thought that, like, that's where all the real paper records are kept.
No.
And I'm like, what? No.
No. By the way, I really there are a lot of paper records. Like even now, businesses that deal mostly in digital information, there are paper records everywhere.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we saw the amount of paper that was just in 9/11 when if you were watching that day of the towers falling, how much paper was flying all over the place. There's that much paper all over the place still, not just in New York, but in every business. Every business has paper records. And they often tell you to print things off for your own records. And so I think that people would still have records of how much they owed a bank in their mortgage. I'm sure a bank would have a paper record of how much somebody owes in their mortgage. I don't think they only keep it in a digital record.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Or they have more than, they don't just keep it in one database. I'm sure that they have backups. You know what I mean?
Well, they took care of the backups in the first season, but I think it's that we haven't evolved to that point where we do everything digitally yet.
No. Well, and we know because we get, as you and I know, there are many people who complain about not being able to do things digitally. But then you have also the opposite people who complain that they have to do things on the computer. But anyway, can't please everybody. Moral of the story. But I think that we should move on. Where do we go from here?
And this, I think, is there's something that needs to break the spiral of lies, that are put in place to control people. And I think especially within church culture, within religious cultures, that's so easy to do. That is so easy to do for a priest or for any spiritual leader within the church, is that they get caught up in this whole control business.
Yep.
That control is addicting. Power is addicting. And that's why when there's that phrase that says that absolute power corrupts absolutely, that I think that when you start getting some power, that it goes to your head. And I think some of the best leaders I know don't let that happen. Don't let the power go to their head. They still try to do what they can. And you can tell that they don't really want the power. Because power is a lonely place.
Yeah. Well, and those people, too, who are the best leaders also are the people who surround themselves with advisors, who surround themselves with people they can trust because they know that they need help. They know they can't just do this on their own. Exactly.
And I think that so often churches get caught up in this because they see that in their minds, unless people go along with the way that they see things going, that the church is going to meet its end, or that the church doors are going to close. Which I think that we really should be less concerned about that and more concerned with what are we doing to help people. Mm-hmm. And the more that we focus on something else, which, in the Christian church's atmosphere, Jesus told us that we should be about that. We should be about helping people and not focusing on that.
Oh, but isn't saving people helping them? Isn't making sure they go to heaven helping them?
Oh, Lordy, no.
Everybody, I'm being sarcastic. I'm sure you're aware, but I'm being very sarcastic.
Well, I think this is very much in line with cults as well.
Yeah.
And I think that the delusions that we tell ourselves, that we continue the lies for ourselves, that we make the delusion even bigger for ourselves. And I was listening to a podcast from Steve Austin. It's Ask Steve Austin. It's not the wrestler Steve Austin. It is former minister or preacher in Alabama, I think it is. But he was interviewing the Naked Pastor, who he has a comic called The Naked Pastor on the internet, which is pretty popular. But he was talking to him about these things, about leaving Christianity behind, leaving the church behind, is what some of the people find to be the hardest. And one of the things was community, was that you've got this weird false sense of community in churches because there's this delusion that when you go in, that everybody's your friend, that not everybody's going to be out for themselves, that you are all family there. And when they did interviews with people who left cults, is that people were in tears because that was it. They left that community that was so tight-knit and so open with each other. But it was a false sense of openness.
Yep.
And I think that that's ultimately what we human beings are looking for. We're looking for that community. We're looking for that place where we can be vulnerable and be safe to be ourselves. And really, in a sense, I think this is very much shown throughout the show here, in that Elliot is looking for that. Elliot is looking for a way to reach out with joining the Bible study in the prison, where he completely tears them down at one point because Mr. Robot has gained control. All of these things where he's looking for that place. He's looking for some way that he can be vulnerable and open. And he's trying with his therapist. He's trying with his friend. He's trying with his journals to try to be vulnerable with himself.
Which is really hard, too.
And Angela is walling herself off. She keeps walling herself off from family. She's walling herself off from her friends. You see this with Darlene. Darlene is starting to wall herself off a little bit, and it leads her to do some horrible things, like killing the lawyer.
Well, and I think that Darlene, too, her problem is, Elliot, or actually was Mr. Robot, was the head of their group.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he's gone, so now she has to take the place. And I think that kind of responsibility, and no longer being the second in the command, but now being the leader, it was just too much for her. Well,
I think that's part of it, is that the people can only control you as much as you let them control you. Is that people only have so much power over you as much as how much power you give to them. So oftentimes we'll give people power without even realizing it. Like more often than not, for lack of a better example, pastors. You give them so much power over your life when really you're the one that has power over your life. You're the one that has control with what you do with your money, with how you give to charity, how you live in your life, and in a sense, you give these items of power to people.
You have to think to yourself too, like, what qualifies this person to tell me how to live my life? Like, what have they done? What have they studied? Like, do they really know what they're talking about, or do they just seem like they know what they're talking about?
Exactly. Are they speaking for God, or are they speaking for themselves?
Yep.
And I think that question should be more important, especially to Christians, is, am I going to be entertained on a Sunday morning, or am I going to try to further my relationship with the divine? Am I going for community, or am I going for someone else's, power delusion?
Yeah, or to be seen.
My own power delusion.
Yep.
So anyway, that's kind of a different take on Mr. Robot Season 2. So what do you guys think? Let us know. Speaking of letting us know, here is our upcoming schedule for this next couple of weeks.
Our schedule.
So let us know about these, and especially about this one in 3 weeks, because we need you guys' feedback.
Yes, tell us what you want to hear. Maybe we'll give it to you.
So first off, we're going to do This Is Us Season 2, Episode 1, which hinted at Jack's demise, and which is kind of sad. It was that last part there, which was just, killer.
Obviously, you cried because you always cry during This Is Us, because that's what it does to you.
By the way, This Is Us writers, you still owe us a box of Kleenex. I did tag you in an ad from Kleenex this week. So
they're on sale.
Yes. If you happen to listen to us, just so you know, you owe us a box of Kleenex. After that is our break that we will be in Las Vegas for a wedding. So we will not be here and recording. There will probably be some writing and stuff done that week, but there will not be a podcast that week. So it's a chance for you guys to catch up on your pop culture and listen to us along with it. After that is your listener suggestion. So we're going to open it up for you guys to give us suggestions on what we should do next after that. Either send us a note on Facebook or give us a call at this number. You can also tell us what you think about Mr. Robot Season 2 and about our discussion on it at 720-372-3879. Again, please let us know what you would like us to talk about in 3 weeks. That's 3 weeks.
3 weeks, yes.
And because there's a lot of stuff out there. We are going to be watching some things like the first episode of Inhumans, even though we're both a little hesitant about it. There are some movies on HBO that I know that we still have yet to watch, like Hidden Figures. It's not Hidden Fences, it's Hidden Figures. I think Fences might be on HBO now. I'll have to check. But there are a couple of the Academy Award nominated movies that we have yet to see. As well as a lot of new TV shows starting up again. Yep,
that we already mentioned.
And we're trying not to do a whole lot of episode by episode things, because there are some of those things that just have filler episodes, which, they don't really have a theme. It's just filler. So anyway, we need your suggestions to know where to go next, because we've got a lot of stuff coming up.
Oh, and tell us what you're excited about. Like if you are like really excited about like the upcoming season of Walking Dead, let us know too, so then we can make sure that we talk about it.
Exactly. Like for instance, the first episode of Walking Dead might be one that we might have to do something on, because it might have a good theme. because they usually do that.
Yes.
This first episode of this last season was Rick kind of losing control to Negan, and anyway.
Yeah. I hope Sheba lives.
Yes. You can find us on social media. We are on Facebook. We are on Tumblr. We're on Reddit. We're on Twitter. We are on...
I'm on Instagram, but not very much.
Instagram. We are on Instagram as well, but we're not on very much. So social media, you can find us there. You can also find us on our website, thehonestfaith.com. You can also find us on Patreon. If you feel like giving to us, we would be very, very, very appreciative.
Very grateful.
Yes, and we would even mention your name in a future episode, as well as giving you some behind-the-scenes kind of stuff, like our notes that help us get through the show. And like this one probably won't be that impressive because, it was kind of brief scratch between... leaf raking and decorating for Halloween and, other things that us families have to do on Sundays.
Oh, maybe we can do a Halloween-themed episode. Let us know if you guys want us to do that. Maybe we can see if we could do a Halloween-themed episode.
Yes. Oh, that's the other thing that we were going to that we talked about at the beginning of the episode that we were going to do is that one about serial killers.
Oh, yes.
And, of course, Stranger Things will be coming up in October.
Of course.
It may not be until November, but it will be coming up.
Well, yeah, because it comes out at the end of October anyway. I mean,
Exactly.
forgive us. We try to, keep up with everything, but life.
Yeah, we've got a toddler. Find us on Patreon. We've got some good stuff for you guys on Patreon. I don't update it that often because we don't have any patrons. If we had patrons, I might update it more often.
Hint, hint.
So with all that being said, we invite you to come and join the conversation.
Bye.